Hello, I'm Monty Betham with episode 30 of Once a Warrior, the final one for 2022. Joining me today is the mastermind behind the early success in the 2000s for the Warriors, Mick Watson. Thanks for your time, my man.
Good morning, Mons. How are you?
Very good, brother. Where are you and what are you up to these days?
But I live in the South Island, a little town called Mount Somers, which is near Mount Hutt, on a little farm. My wife living the quiet life.
Living the quiet life. So besides that, because I know you're not always about the quiet life, you're doing a little bit with the insurance company, running it. Well, you do well.
Yeah, I'm head of operations for Newey Insurance New Zealand. And that keeps me busy. Certainly not like rugby league, that's for sure.
Mick, normally people come to the club because they want to come to the club. It's off their own back. But you came to the club through different circumstances. You were trying to help out a friend, and that friend is a very well-known friend, Matthew Ridge.
Yeah, so Ridge used to work for me at Pepsi. Back then, Pepsi were the major sponsor of Manly Seagulls. And, Manly used the various ways, I guess, to beat the salary cap. And Matthew worked for me at Pepsi. One of the worst employees you'll ever have, as you can imagine, knowing him, Monty. But so when he was invited by Eric Watson in to come become a shareholder of the Warriors, he reached out and asked me to, for my opinion on marketing and sponsorship, and also the coaching program. They were looking to recruit Bob Fulton or Mal Meninga because they were recruitment coaches. So I ended up writing a paper for him to fundamentally to make him go away because he was so annoying. And that included the choice between Wayne Bennett's assistant, which was Craig Bellamy, and Daniel Anderson, who was Brian Smith's assistant. Daniel had just won a reserve grade premiership, and actually Daniel and I had a close association. Daniel and I we'd coached a team back in the late 90s after I finished playing in South Sydney. And so we knew each other extremely well. We went to the same school. And we liked the same brand of rugby league, so we had a close association. So I presented those guys to Ridgie in a hope that he'd go away, and I presented it to both Matthew and Eric. And at the end of that, Eric stood up and shook my hand and said, "I've got myself the new CEO. Welcome aboard."
It wasn't the glam, and it wasn't what you were used to in terms of the corporate world. It was totally different, Mick. You had to start from scratch, absolute scratch.
If I'd have known what I was walking into, I wouldn't have accepted the job. So the first day I went into the Warriors, there was nothing. It was a shell. There was no footballs for day one, and that was the first thing when I walked in. Daniel said, "We've got nothing." That the place had been stripped bare by who I'm not entirely sure. So we walked in and we had to make our own. We had to make our own money. We had no members, no sponsors, no revenue, no working capital. So it was an incredible journey in the way that we actually had to build it ourselves, and that meant we'd work all day during the day trying to work out exactly how we're going to build a club. And then at night, Daniel Anderson and I would sit at the kitchen table and we'd be ringing England while you guys were playing in the World Cup, Monty, trying to sign you guys back to the club.
And that's the thing, right? When you finally get the job, the position, how do you build your first squad?
The main goal was we thought if we signed Stacey Jones, we can build a team around Stacey Jones. So that became our pinnacle. That was imperative that we get Stacey. And once we got Stacey, things started to move in place. But Daniel and I would sit there every night with the whiteboard and we'd look at what we had in New Zealand and what the Warriors had done previously. And to be quite frank, Mark Graham and previous management had done a good job in setting up a really great institution of young fellas coming through like yourself, like Clinton Torpey, Juri Siusu, Francis Melly, Henry Farfelli. So those players need to be retained, and then we needed to get our marquee signing, which was Stacey Jones. But when we looked at the mix and the way that we wanted to play and the way that Daniel wanted to build the roster, we knew we needed more than that. We needed a blend of experienced players, of those 100-game veterans, to underpin the style of football that we wanted to play. And that was going to be more challenging. I was actually off trying to talk to Kevin Walters and Michael Hancock. And obviously the Brisbane Broncos were the pinnacle back then. And I was calling them, talking to their managers, speaking to them. Daniel and I were slaughtering a chicken chow mein at the dinner table one night. And the phone rang, my phone rang. And the guy on the other end of the phone said, is that Mick Watson? I said, yes. He said, it's Wayne Bennett. And, I was literally with chopsticks eating and pulled the phone away and said to Ando, Wayne Bennett, as if. And I was like, whatever, mate. And he was like, pardon? I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I actually thought it was one of our friends or someone pranking me. And the guy went on and said to me, you're not going to get Michael Hancock or Kevy Waters. They won't play against me. And it suddenly dawned on me very quickly, this was actually Wayne Bennett that was speaking to me. But what he did say in that conversation was, I really hadn't heard much about Kevin Campion. He said, I'll get you Kevin Campion. And I looked across and pulled the phone away and said to Ando, he wants to give us Kevin Campion. And Ando was literally throwing things at me going, yes. That's how we signed Kevin Campion. It's actually a gift from Wayne Bennett. So Kevin Campion was the first domino. Obviously, Daniel had a relationship with Mark Tukey, who'd also been with Parramatta. We wanted to sign Richard Villasanti. And then the last piece of the puzzle, we were looking at a centre three-quarter. We were actually in the process of looking at Craig Innes. We were looking at players that had, again, that 100-game experience because we couldn't speak to Ivan Cleary. His manager, Wayne Beavis, wouldn't allow us to get to him. And I was in the office one day, actually having a coffee in the lounge, and Ivan walked in a pair of shorts, and he thought I was the decorator because the office was being painted. And he said to me, "Hey mate, do you know I could find the CEO?" And I was like, "Well, that's me." And he sat down, we talked, and I said, "Mate, I'll put together a contract." And this is a true story. Ivan stuck his hand out and said, "No, that's our contract, mate." And that's where the deal was done in the office. So I think the last player to form that group was actually Logan Swan. And once we had that, we had a first grade team ready to go to Canterbury for our first trial. And we achieved all this in 8 weeks, mate. We only had 8 weeks, which was it's unbelievable to think of now.
If you think about Ando, Kempi, Reggie, for a young man coming in and having those guys around you in your ears, I mean, they complemented each other so well. The strengths of those three.
Yeah, look, the thing is, it really complemented each other. Daniel Anderson was a school teacher by trade, so he was a disciplinarian by trade. And so he there was always probably going to be that gap of authority, if that made sense. What Tony Kemp did do was he provided a voice of the people, a voice of the players to Daniel, a representative, a conduit between the two. He's just freshly retired himself. He understood the players' perspective. He was a wonderful assistant coach. Matthew's a great player, one of New Zealand's greats, won a premiership himself. He knew what it took to win. And so everything that Daniel did, Matthew was there to temper, run his eye over. And also I think he gave a no-frills approach to the players, like what wouldn't be accepted. And I think the thing that these days that gets washed over, Monty, is that we were all, like I was 35, Daniel was 35, Matthew was 35. Kempi was around the same age. I think he was, around 35. Eric Watson was only 45, and they were the people running the club. We were so young. So the players could relate to that, and they could relate to our mindset.
What we lacked in money back then, you made up for in leadership and motivation, and that's something that strikes me of you even to this day. Where did a young 35-year-old Michael get that from? Because you were a mastermind of that.
I was very passionate, and I'd played rugby league, obviously, in lower grades with Parramatta and South Sydney, and thought that at times that they had it wrong, that they didn't actually let the players speak, that they didn't go to the players. So I think, it's much easier if you become a collaboration. I would call the players in, Kevin Campion, Ivan Cleary, yourself, Monty Betham, Stacey Jones, Owen Gutenbill, and then eventually in the next year, PJ Marsh, and talk about other clubs, talk about other instances, talk about what the players want, and try and build a collaboration. So not to be managing down and telling everyone this is the way it's going to be. It was more managing up and say, what do you want? How can we do that?
When you think about the first time we made the playoffs in 2001, the squad that you put together, what were the keys to making the finals for the first time? Was it the brand of foot we played, and where did that come from?
What we wanted to see was a dominant forward pack of hard, relentless players, minimising mistakes, big on defence. And then our offence game, really, the ball either went, to Stacey or to Ali. And then you guys were encouraged to do whatever you want in a certain passage in certain periods of the field. But first of all, we were tough. We were going to play a brand of football that was confrontational, hard steel, hard, ferocious defensive team. We're the toughest guys in the NRL, in my opinion. You went out there fearless, and actually, I think the players' poll is always something that everyone loves in rugby league. For those first 2 years, the players rated the Warriors the most feared pack in the competition. Kevin Campion, the most feared player in the competition. And then, of course, he handed that mantle down to you as well. So we were feared. And in those first 3 years, the Warriors were the most feared team. When you talk about key moments, the night we beat the Brisbane Broncos, and Logan Swan scored that barnstorming try. Stacey Jones dropped the field goal. And I remember I leapt out of the box and I pulled open the coach's door, and Daniel Anderson, he was so humble, man. How humble was he? He looked at me and went, I don't know, just like that. But as you players, as we all know, we actually put that down and we talked about beating the Broncos the whole time, and Kevin Campion wanted to beat them. And so getting to the playoffs, the problem with year one, we came up against a red-hot Parramatta team that actually should have won the premiership in our first finals playoff. And we never spoke about anything beyond that, did we? We just spoke about we got to make the finals. And we made the finals. And, of course, we bowed out, and I think the worst loss in NRL history.
The last day of 2001, when we left to break up for the year, you called me into your office and said, you're going to be the captain next year. And I just laughed this off because we were in the playoffs for the first time. We had co-captains of Stacey Jones, Kevin Campion. What were you thinking, man?
Yeah, I think that we wanted to build for the future. We had a long-term view. You were a natural leader. You're the most natural leader I've ever met, mate, and probably the best Warriors captain, in my opinion, that we ever had. And the thing about it was you'd captain every team. You were a natural leader. You led from the front at training. Ridgie thought that. He played with you. He knew you. I could see that from our conversations. You were a rugby league straight A student, if that made sense. Everything that you did, you talked about the club, the betterment of the club, and that's not nothing against Stace and Kevin, but obviously Kevin was there to help us build the club, and he's coming to the end of his career. We also believe that Stacey was the marquee player and needed to be left alone to play his rugby league. So it was the way. Again, it comes back to that brand of football that we wanted to play, and so although it may have been in your eyes premature, to us, it was a natural decision. And I think, even though you had a dreadful injury in 2002, mate, you still led the club, and that includes when we started 2002. That was, I can still remember that day, and you had Kevin Campion's premiership rings with you, and showed the team and told the team, we want to get one of these ourselves, and we won't be happy until you guys were wearing a ring of your own. And I truly believe that was the start of the journey for 2002, which was, was a beautiful journey. It just finished a little bit short.
It was a great year. What was your memories of 2002?
Mate, probably my greatest memory of 2002 was we were going to play the Sharks in the prelim final, and we were playing obviously in Sydney. Sharks don't have a great fan base. Warriors have a very small fan base, and both the NRL and us were worried that it was just going to be Sharks fans and no one else there for us. So after speaking to David Gallup, we came up with an idea where we would actually purchase 20,000 tickets from the NRL, and Vodafone actually helped us do that. They're great sponsors in Tim Miles. So Tim and I worked together to achieve that. And then what we did was we actually came up with the concept of giving away 4 tickets to every Kiwi passport holder that turned up on the Monday morning at the SFS. Mate, we had 10,000 people turn up out the front, and come the Sharks game, it was like an Ericsson home crowd. There was 15 or 20,000 people. There was jam-packed full of Warriors, and of course, the great 50-metre run down the sideline by Clinton Toppy, planting the ball on the line, and then the greatest moment of all time when everyone thought that Stacey Jones was going to do one thing, and he pulled a rabbit out of his hat, put the ball through for John Carlaw. Next thing you know, we're in the grand final. And we got. I think they radioed through to the plane to say the guys won't be going home very quickly. There's 10,000 people at the airport, and we were just like, we couldn't believe it. What are you talking about? What do you mean? that was that was outrageous. That was unbelievable. The home final against the Raiders, incredible. That was just an incredible moment. And I think, to be honest, I think the Raiders got bullied out of that game by the crowd. We were in cruise mode all the way through because everything was just perfect. Actually, the Prime Minister was sitting in our box, and it was just like, I think for that moment we held New Zealand in our hand, and New Zealand held the Warriors in their heart, and that was amazing for rugby league, right? I think, obviously the minor premiership, the JJ Giltinan Shield, and seeing you guys hold that, it's one of the most precious memories, and unfortunately, that's the silverware that we've got to show for that year. And so when you look at what that team achieved that year, it really, I don't know, it's going to be very hard to repeat, I think, and find that magic again.
I often watched on the field some of the absolute brilliance that we had in terms of the players out on my left, out on my right, through the middle. Which were the players, and what did you love about these particular players that you'll never forget?
Oh, mate, I loved them. Look, everyone knows that. Everyone used to call my office a shrine. Obviously, I loved the tough men. Jerry Sisu, Kevin Campion, Owen Gutenbill, and yourself. So the tough players I loved, and the tough moments I loved. I mean, the Kevin Campion Shane Webke fight. When you took on the Broncos pack yourself. You and inevitably Arwen backing you up, and what was that back row from the Bulldogs of Reardon, and you in Wellington, mate. I love those moments. I guess I'm a bit of a dinosaur like that, but we don't play that. We don't see that sort of football, and that's the rugby league that I love, the brutality of it. And I hate to admit it, but I guess maybe there's a bit of Reg Reagan in me. There's those punch ups. I don't know, you can't go past those moments as a rugby league fan. And at the end of the day, I'm just a rugby league fan. That left-hand edge of Ali Lauatiti, Sione Faumuina, Clinton Torpey, Francis Melly, that, mate, if you came up, any team that came up against that got dominated. Creative geniuses, freaks with the ball in their hands. Some of the tries that the Warriors scored during that period. Now bring in Brent Webb as a post-line runner. I mean, literally, if anyone got their nose through the line, Webby was there to take the ball. The birth of Lance O'Hire as a first-grade footballer at 18, 19, straight out of high school. Modu Tony, broken play runner. PJ Marsh, obviously. Stacey Jones, was really competing with Andrew Johns as the greatest player in rugby league then. Him and Andrew Johns competed each other with innovation as far as the banana kick, the corkscrew, these kicks going out. They were freaky, the torpedo bombers came in, and all these things, these innovative things, and they've gone again from the game. They just came in for a couple of years. And Stacey was at the forefront as a master of creativity. John Carlaw, the consummate professional, right? Just doing all the little things that people didn't understand. The fans fell in love with the club and the players at a new dynamic. We grew our fan base, and suddenly we were New Zealand's team. And as a business, we were profitable. So from the NRL, we tipped every box. We had a real pride in the way that we played. We had a real pride in the way that we saw each other. And I think that made for a very proud club in those first 3 years.
2003, I bring that up because, we're one game off. We're in the preliminary final as well. But your memories of that game?
Mate, if I'm being quite frank, I remember sitting in the stands after we lost to Penrith in the final, and I was in shock. I just thought we were on exactly the same pathway. We were about to win that game, go to the grand final, and win the grand final in our second attempt. We can debate it so many different ways. The thing that always sticks in my mind was what would have happened. Did we let Campo and Ivan go 1 year too early? Should we have kept them for one more year? Because, Kevin went up to the Cowboys. He still played good football up there, for the next couple of years. And, Ivan probably... So there's always that. There's that firstly. Well, what would that have done? And would we have continued 2002 if we had the veterans still there? I think we did everything exactly the same as 2002. I think we played, in some ways, some better passages of football. I think we've grown as a club. I think that we matured as as managers. I think the coaching staff have matured, management have matured, leadership had matured. The Kiwis were playing good football. There was a hell of a lot happening in rugby league. The Bartercar Cup had improved. I thought we were on our way to, a form of dynasty. So after 2003, I think that we fundamentally made some mistakes because we started to change. We hadn't had any change up to then. We also hadn't really suffered loss or adversity. All we'd had is finals football, and we just thought we'd continue to go down that path. The problem was we weren't as focused. So I started to work on other projects, such as boxing promotions through our professional boxer, Shane Cameron, the Mountain Warrior. And we were also having conversations with the International Rugby League Board about creating a team Pacifica and running that out of Ericsson Stadium in conjunction with Samoa. So we were, I spent the whole off season over in London, over in Samoa, having discussions with them, setting up fights for Shane. And that was the end of the way that we conducted ourselves and the way we ran things. We were running things a certain way, and we moved on, and the rest is inevitable.
You gave us a lot of special times, and one special moment in particular, which was, a bit of thought out of the box, perhaps, and that was the 19th Warrior, Sir Peter Leach. A wonderful moment. Yeah. That is a wonderful gesture. Talk to me about that and how you came to that.
Well, he's a special man. And when I first landed there, I was Australian, I'd never heard of the Mad Butcher. And everyone was saying, Matthew Ridge in particular was saying, as we were building programs and building marketing, he was like, oh, you need to speak to the Mad Butcher. And I'm like, I didn't understand what a Mad Butcher was. And then he came to meet with me, and he was humble and he was gracious. And so I went away to Peter and said, do you want to be the channel manager for the club? And he was just like, oh, mate, I'll do anything for the club. That'd be fantastic. The first trip away, we, I think it was like literally we were in our hotel room. The team meeting was at 9. Our first breakfast of our very first trip away, and there was a knock on my door at 5:30 in the morning, and I got it was in a hotel room. I got a fright, and I went to the door, and I looked through the door. And then, you get that long, elongated look, and there was someone and they were shaving and I opened the door up, and the butcher came through and grabbed me by the front of the shirt, and he said, now, you listen here, mate. You may be the boss when you're at home, but I'm the boss here, right? And I was like, okay, sure. And he said, so if you're late down there for breakfast, you'll have me to answer for. I said, mate, it's not for 3.5 hours. And he said, right, now get up and get ready. And then he closed the door, and I was like he's mad. And the other story that I'll tell is and I always say that this is Sir Peter Leach. When I realised that he was I don't know if he was mad or just the greatest character in the sport. We were down in Coogee Bay, and I went down to the pub for a quick beer as we got off the plane one day, and he had a rolled up big league and was walking through the streets and yelling out through the big league, "The Warriors are in town. The Warriors are in town." But no one knew who he was. He would promote the game like no one ever met. He would turn up to games with beautiful little children that had to face incredible adversity under difficult conditions. And the love that he gave the people, the children, the game, and the players and the club, I can't even, mate. Could you ever think of anyone more worthy that should have a player's number on their back that didn't play? So to me, it was only natural that he was the 19th Warrior. So we retired that number from the club.
Mick, once a Warrior, always a Warrior. We thank you for your integral part you played in, creating some of the most iconic moments and some of the most iconic players in the club's history, my man.
Mate, I played a small role, and it was just really great to be involved, mate, and great to know fantastic people like yourself. Thank you very much.
I'm Monty Betham. I want to thank the legends that have come on the show to give us their time and their stories. Their insight have been amazing, and you, the people at home that have given us your support throughout the year.